Hello everyone, and welcome to today's study. We're diving into Proverbs 29:13, a short but profound verse that speaks to God's justice and His care for all people, regardless of their status. The verse says, "The poor and the oppressor have this in common. The Lord gives sight to the eyes of both." At first glance, this might seem like a simple observation, but there's a lot of depth here. Let's break it down together. 1. The context of Proverbs. Proverbs is a book of wisdom, written primarily by King Solomon, and it's filled with practical advice for living a righteous life. Many of its verses contrast the lives of the righteous and the wicked, the wise and the foolish, and the rich and the poor. Proverbs 29:13 fits into this pattern by highlighting a truth about God's sovereignty and His care for humanity. The verse mentions two very different people, the poor and the oppressor. On the surface, they seem to have nothing in common. One is vulnerable, while the other is powerful. Yet the verse points out a shared reality. Both are dependent on God for their very sight. This reminds us that no matter our circumstances, we are all equal before God. 2. The meaning of sight. Let's focus on the phrase, "The Lord gives sight to the eyes of both." What does this mean? First, it's a literal truth. God is the creator of all life, and He gives everyone the ability to see. Whether rich or poor, powerful or weak, we all rely on God for our physical sight. But there's also a deeper spiritual meaning here. Sight can symbolize understanding, wisdom, and awareness. The poor may lack material resources, but God gives them insight and hope. The oppressor, on the other hand, may have wealth and power, but they are spiritually blind unless God opens their eyes to justice and compassion. This verse reminds us that God is the source of all wisdom and understanding. It's a call to humility. No one can claim superiority because everything we have, including our ability to see and understand, comes from God. 3. The poor and the oppressor. Now let's look at the two groups mentioned, the poor and the oppressor. The poor represent those who are vulnerable and marginalized. In biblical times, they often lacked advocates and were easily exploited. Yet this verse assures us that God sees them and cares for them. He gives them sight, not just physical vision, but also hope and dignity. The oppressor, on the other hand, represents those who misuse their power. They might seem to have everything, but without God's guidance, they are spiritually blind. This verse is a warning to them. Their power is temporary, and they are just as dependent on God as anyone else. Together, these two groups remind us that God's justice is universal. He sees the struggles of the poor and holds the oppressor accountable. No one is beyond His reach. 4th application for today. So how does this apply to us today? First, it's a call to gratitude. Whether we're in a season of lack or abundance, we must remember that everything we have, our sight, our understanding, our very lives, comes from God. Second, it's a challenge to examine our hearts. Are we using our resources and influence to help others? Or are we contributing to oppression? God calls us to be agents of His justice and compassion. Finally, it's a reminder of hope. No matter how difficult our circumstances, God sees us and cares for us. And no matter how powerful we may feel, we are accountable to Him. Let's close with this thought. Proverbs 29:13 invites us to see the world through God's eyes. A world where everyone is equal in His sight and where His justice and mercy prevail. Conclusion. Thank you for joining me in exploring Proverbs 29:13. I hope this verse inspires you to live with humility, gratitude, and a heart for justice. Until next time, may God open your eyes to His truth and guide your steps. Blessings. Amen.